Hey, it's Lisa. Welcome back to my channel. I'm coming at you on a Saturday. I'm a day late for my upload. I'm kind of debating maybe moving things to Saturdays. We'll see. Stay tuned for that. I'm taking a painting break because I am painting my house in preparation for a exciting photo shoot this week and some fun new interior design related content. Reveal of my whole house coming at you. It's going to come out on June 8th, so stay tuned for that. But I want to just take a few minutes and talk about something very, very important to me, which is mental health in marriage. So this week, my husband and I attended the CAMH Difference Makers Gala here in Toronto. CAMH is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and it provides incredible support and treatment to people encountering very significant mental health challenges. My husband, Josh, has struggled privately with depression, and then more recently, more publicly with depression for the last 5 years. And there are so many things that I wish married couples and everyone knew about mental health. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a couple of the highlights from the CAMH Gala, and then as well, stay tuned to the end of this video where I'm going to share some really strategic, practical things that a couple can do to support mental illness in a marriage. So first of all, it was an incredible event, like in terms of a beautifully designed, beautifully executed event. It was just like stunningly beautiful, from the color palette to the menu to how guests were treated. And there was a really interesting variety of stories shared. And I'm so passionate about people sharing their stories because I think that's where the stigma just like 100% then becomes less of an issue. The more we talk, the more mental illness becomes normalized, as opposed to like this taboo thing that's like a big dark secret. So I was really struck by a couple of stories. One was Charlie Cummings' story. He was, a successful business guy, beautiful family, and he was treated for his depression and psychosis at CAMH. And it was really interesting, and it was interesting to watch my husband because I could see him nodding for so much of his story being told. And he shared quite candidly that he felt like if any of his business colleagues found out about his depression, if his friends found out about his depression, that he would just be rejected, his career would be over, and then he would lose his family, and on and on and on. And it was interesting how he spoke about going to CAMH and how he was diagnosed with psychosis and depression, and how the doctor literally just said, "We can treat that. We will treat that and you will get better." And how he felt so much liberation from that. I can get better. I can get well. And that he wouldn't have the same shame and guilt if he had like a physical ailment or a physical treatment that he had to be hospitalized for. I also absolutely love the story of this young woman in Alberta, where at 13 years old, she unfortunately tried to take her own life, but failed, and as a result, really used the experience to help others. And it was really incredible what she shared. She shared, like, imagine, we have first aid kits for scrapes and bruises. Any moms, you've got like Band-Aids in your purse, you've got like baby wipes to clean up things. So, there's first aid kits for physical ailments. What would a first aid kit look like for mental illness? And that one was just so interesting for me to ponder and reflect on. And I feel like I could do a whole other video. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in that, in what goes into a first aid kit for mental illness. I just think that is so, like, oh my gosh, empathy was 100%. Empathy would go in there, and lack of judgment would go in there, and the ability to listen intently and physically, like meaning like, you're nodding and you're all into a conversation and there's no judgment. That would 100% be in this first aid kit. I was also really struck by the story of a gentleman in the Muslim community who had social anxiety disorder, or still does suffer from social anxiety disorder, to the point where he could not leave his house, like literally could would not leave his house. And with treatment at CAMH, he was able to get out there and live a normal life to the point where he is now training others how to be mental health first responders. So similar to this whole first aid kit idea, mental health first responders, and very much so taking an active role in the Muslim community, which I think is amazing. And then finally, I was so impacted by the story of a former NHL player. And he talked about how he also hid his mental illness and also felt so much shame and guilt, that, he's this NHL player. He should be this everything in life should be good, and he just felt so much shame. And he echoed this whole notion that is a big theme for CAMH this month, the month of May, that mental health is health. And if he was being treated for a sprained ankle or a pulled muscle or whatever because he plays hockey, he would not have any shame or guilt or whatever about it. It's simply something he would have to have treated. Why can't we look at mental illness exactly the same? So I talk very openly about this because of, I guess, my passion or my realization that I also had a lot of shame and guilt about mental illness in our marriage. When and again, this is very vulnerable to share, but when it first entered into our marriage 5 years ago, I just had, I didn't want anybody to know. It was our deep, dark secret. I think Josh, if you asked him, he would say the exact same thing, that he did not want anybody to know. And it took him several years before speaking more openly about it. But what I wish I could have gone back in time and told myself to not suffer alone. I don't know why we like to suffer alone. Why is that? I don't know. Tell me in the comments below. And really I know why we suffer alone. It's because we're really worried about what people will think of us. If we disclose something that, may be controversial or not popular or shows a sign of weakness, shows that we're not perfect, of course, we don't want to be, discredited or looked down upon in the eyes of others. So it's a totally natural human thing. But I really wish, and this is what a big part of why I Instagram and why I YouTube and why I talk about things like this in motherhood and in mental illness, we cannot suffer alone. We just can't. We weren't meant to. And so I wish I could have told myself back then to just ask for help a little bit more and not be afraid to say when I'm having a hard time or when my family is having a hard time. I used to lie all the time about why we couldn't attend something or why we couldn't, do something. And I used to get super frustrated with my husband for not being able to keep up with my pace in life. And that's not healthy either because it's not fair. One of the things that I often say is and again, this theme of mental health is health, is that and again, this is vulnerable for me to admit, but when I was younger, I would get so frustrated and have so much resentment towards my spouse and just be thinking in my head, why can't you keep up? Or why can't you just, get out of bed and do things at the pace I want to do things? And here's the thing. If I had a child who was in a wheelchair, it would not be fair of me to scream at them, why can't you just walk? If I had a partner who had diabetes, I would not scream at them, why can't you produce more insulin? It would not be fair. Mental illness has symptoms that come with it, that can be treated, that can be managed, that can be 100% part of an amazing life when treated like you would any of these other illnesses. So this whole thing of mental health is health was really highlighted, as well as celebrated, as well as educated upon at the CAMH Gala, and we were just so grateful and really inspired to be in attendance. So as promised, here are my top strategies for supporting a spouse with mental illness. And just to remind you that I'm coming at it from the lens of depression and anxiety, because that is what my husband has. But I would imagine that many of these strategies would work with regardless what mental illness a couple is dealing with. Okay, so strategy number one, think of the mental illness like a couple, like you are solving the problem as a family. This is not just your spouse's thing. So why do I think this is important, this mindset shift? Because it is like mental health requires a community of support. So if you can think of it not as like, oh gosh, my husband's condition, but almost like this is like, yes, obviously it's your spouse's condition, but like coming up with strategies as a team, coming up with strategies together, rather than, sort of a force. It's like a force and you're kind of like battling a force. You are literally tackling the problem together. And I think this is really helpful with resentment, because then it becomes less of a like, this is your problem and I'm fixing it, and that resentment can come from that. Whereas if you kind of can tackle it from more like, this is our problem and we're going to do this together because we love each other and we are committed to each other and we're going to make this work. So first strategy is to almost tackle it like a team. The second strategy is to ensure you have support. Okay, so whether or not you're comfortable talking about it publicly, and I just want to, put it out there, please, you've got to talk about it, because the more we hide it, the more it's like just, I don't know, like the shame and the guilt that I talked about earlier is so present. So whether or not you're comfortable talking about it publicly, you've got to find a support system that can help you thrive. This support system, if you have children especially, must contain babysitting. Like, you must have regular babysitting. I cannot stress how crucial it is for you as the supporter of someone with mental illness, and as well as the person, the spouse, to have time alone. And to have not the stress of how much like household work and like all that kind of stuff, like when you have a babysitter, sometimes they'll help out too with like the cleaning and whatever. But get support for all of the things, because honestly, like mental illness in my experience requires space and like time away from triggers and sometimes house stuff. And, depending on the ages, kid stuff can be a significant trigger of overwhelm and anxiety. So regular childcare, I talk about self-care on this channel, like probably too much. You're probably all sick of me talking about self-care. You can definitely check out those videos. I'll put them in the cards. But you've got to find regular systems of support. Number 3, I would say, is a very practical strategy, is to not be afraid to ask for help for your own mental health as well. And what do I mean by that? So if you'd be interested in a video on this, I have many opinions, and I have a long history of my own experiences with seeing a psychoanalyst, a counselor, seeing a spiritual director. So if you'd be interested in any of that, it's pretty vulnerable, but I'd be happy to share. But it doesn't have to necessarily even be that formal. So a couple of things that I want to say. So you've got to have your own support network in terms of your mental health, your personal. I'm talking about the spouse supporting the spouse with mental illness. You've got to have your own outlet. And there are a couple of really quick and simple things I want to suggest. Number 1 is there are counseling lines, I think they call crisis lines, at least here in Toronto, where you can call and someone will just listen to you. And it's amazing. So I have utilized this a couple times when I've just been sort of at my, bottom, and it's been late at night, and like, you know, my friends are all sleeping or whatever, and I just need to talk to somebody about what is going on. And oh my word, I remember feeling so guilty about calling because I thought, oh gosh, I'm taking the place of somebody who might be, you know, like in a much more state of crisis. But the girl on the phone was so empathetic and incredible, and she was just like, imagine if we let everybody just get to crisis before they sought support. She was like, no, like, you are in the right place to be calling. So think of a crisis line that you can call. Think too of like trusted friends who will not judge. This is the key. Oh my goodness. Trusted friends who will just listen and be like, oh my gosh, that must be hard. And who will just like, you know, maybe like send a meal over, or like just literally like, here's a cup of coffee, like, here, I just want you to sit and have it. Like, not necessarily trying to fix it, but just like listening to you. That is huge. So you've got to make sure that you have your own mental health very much, you know, at the forefront in terms of keeping it healthy. Okay, so those are my 3 strategies, very practical ones that I think are so helpful to couples who are dealing with mental illness. If you like this video, I would love for you to give it a big thumbs up and hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my videos, which come out on Fridays typically, but today is Saturday. And stay tuned. As I mentioned, I am in the middle of a painting party, such a fun painting party on a Saturday night, because we are getting ready to share my entire house reveal with you. I am so excited to share that all with you June 8th. So come on back to see all that fun. You guys, I love chatting with you about this kind of stuff. It makes me, I don't know, feel less alone. And it also is just so important to me that people know that there is so much hope. Cheers to designing your beautiful life.